The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "A rich man had a steward who was reported to him for squandering his property. He summoned him and said, 'What is this I hear about you? Prepare a full account of your stewardship, because you can no longer be my steward.' The steward said to himself, 'What shall I do? Now that my master is taking the position of steward away from me, I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I am removed from the stewardship, they may welcome me into their homes.' He called in his master's debtors, one by one. To the first one he said, 'How much do you owe my master?' He replied, 100 measures of olive oil. He said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Sit down and quickly write out one for 50. Then to another the steward said, 'And you, how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 cores of wheat. The steward said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Write one for 80. And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently. For the children of this world are more powerful in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. I tell you, make friends for yourselves with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails you, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. If, therefore, you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In some ways, this is a very confusing gospel. It almost sounds like Jesus is impressed with the dishonest steward. But I wish we could keep reading this gospel, because in the next line, after this parable, Luke says that the reason he told this parable was because he knew that the Pharisees were listening into his conversation, and he was trying to kind of prick their conscience, because, Luke says, the Pharisees were concerned about gathering wealth. So like all good parables, Jesus is forcing them to make a decision. Choose to pursue wealth or choose to pursue holiness. But if we dig a little bit deeper, this gospel isn't really about money. It's more about forgiveness and redemption and salvation. But I'll get to that a little bit later. Right now, I just want to kind of check in with all of you and see how we're doing. Kind of take the temperature of your soul today. So how are we doing? Do you feel like this? This is the emotion joy from the movie Inside Out. Or do you feel a little bit more like this? This is the emotion called ennui. It's been a rough couple of weeks in the United States, hasn't it? And around the world, for that matter. And maybe because of that, I've been feeling a little bit more nostalgic lately, pining for a time in my life when I was a kid and I had no worries. Maybe it's because we're quickly approaching the 250th anniversary of our country, and I can still remember the bicentennial. Incidentally, do you know what they call the 250th anniversary? It can be called a semi-quincentennial, or a sesquicentennial, or a quarter millennial. I think McDonald's should come up with a sandwich for next year called the quarter millennial. And if they do, you're my witnesses. I get the copyright for that sandwich. Well, back in 1976, we had what they called the bicentennial. And I can still remember two things that sort of stick out in my memory from that year. The first was the Freedom Train. Does anybody remember the Freedom Train? It made a stop in Aurora at the Burlington Northern Tracks. The Freedom Train was sort of a rolling museum of artifacts from Americana, from American history. It was 26 cars that was pulled by a steam locomotive, and they claimed that it was the most significant railroad moment since the railway was invented. One of the cars in the Freedom Train actually had the Liberty Bell in it from Philadelphia, so take that, Father Matt. But the Freedom Train made its way around from April of 75 until December of 76. It made its way around to all 48 states, and they claim that over 7 million people walked onto the Freedom Train, and tens of millions of others lined the tracks just to watch the train go by. Who knew? But the second thing that happened in 1976 that was significant was the beginning of my basketball career. This is my 5th grade team from St. Joe's in Aurora. I'm on the bottom left. I'm number 35. My basketball career never really took off, though. I blame my parents. Genetics. I was short and slow, and I couldn't jump. But other than that, I was a pretty good basketball player. But if I'm being honest, the 1970s wasn't the best time in history either. If you think back on it, remember some of the things that happened in the 70s? President Nixon had to resign in disgrace. The Vietnam War was still going on. Over 58,000 young Americans were killed in that war. This part I forgot. Did you know that President Ford, there were 2 different assassination attempts on his life while he was president? I had forgotten that. And the economy was in the tank. The 70s were kind of rough. Kind of reminds me of the book of Ecclesiastes, when the author says, "Nothing is new under the sun. Everything has already existed in the ages that preceded us." Yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks in the United States and around the world, for that matter. It can lead us to feel anxious and depressed and worried. But you know who isn't anxious and depressed and worried? God isn't. Because he's seen all this before. He's got this. Make no mistake, God is in charge. But that doesn't mean we don't have a role to play. There's a reason why you are alive right now. From the beginning of time, God knew that things were going to be a little rough in 2025. But he also knew that he was going to create you. You were born for this time. So what are we supposed to do? Well, our readings today give us two clues. Number one, St. Paul tells us to pray. Pray especially, he says, for those in authority. In times of political and social unrest, people can get distracted from their main focus, which is God. We can't worship well with hearts full of anger. It takes away time and energy that's better used in developing and growing in our own relationship with God. And number two, the gospel says, pursue holiness. You see, Jesus isn't advocating dishonest practices with today's parable. Instead, he's highlighting the shrewdness of the steward. And as Christians, he wants us to exhibit this same level of shrewdness in pursuing holiness. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, here's what I mean. I met a woman last weekend who was making a Curcio retreat. This woman was in a wheelchair, and she is dying of ALS. But not only did she want to go on this retreat, she also wanted to go to confession. So the priest that was on the retreat wheeled her into a room where they were doing confessions, and he sat and listened to her. And it took a long time because of the ravages of the disease. She had a difficult time even speaking. But he made out what she was trying to say, and on behalf of the church, he absolved her of her sins and gave her pardon and peace. And then he asked her, he said, why did you want to go on this retreat? He said, it must have been very difficult for you even getting here in the state of your condition. And she said, because I'm going to meet Jesus soon. And I want to be ready. That's the kind of shrewdness that Jesus is talking about in today's gospel. The shrewdness to pursue holiness. So, in the next few moments of silence, I'd ask you to do two things. Pray for the world's leaders that we may lead a quiet and tranquil life. And then ask God to show us what he wants us to do in our pursuit of holiness. And may I be one of the first to wish you a happy semi-quincentennial.